So in this session, I want to talk to you about an aspect of adult learning that is really cool and we're very excited about. It's something that allows participants to build their skills and react in real time to situations that they'll eventually encounter in their work. The innovation here is not the methodology itself, but it's the way in which RedR is using it that is very interesting and that I think you guys will be excited about. So we're going to be discussing something called simulation-based interventions, which is the RedR way of saying what a lot of you probably already know, what we call sims. A simulation is a completely engineered interactive exercise that tests the capability of an organization or an individual to respond to a created disaster. Sims are normally run as field exercises, and they include a scenario that's as true to real life as is possible. They can take many forms, and they're not new to many content areas of humanitarian action. But by their nature, you never see the same sim twice. That adaptability makes them more effective for learning, and we think that leads to more effective humanitarian action. Simulations have been widely used in the humanitarian training space for security reasons, to better equip trainees or deployees to deal with things that they might encounter in the field. Situations like what to do if there's crossfire or a carjacking or a kidnapping, or what to do if there's a high pressure situation. RedR is expanding the role of sims to beyond security, and we incorporate them in many of our courses. For example, in our Essentials of Humanitarian Practice course, we put participants in the breaking days of the Nepal earthquake in 2015, and they respond as cluster representatives to the emerging needs of affected populations. We use simulation-based exercises to train NHS volunteers and foreign medical teams who responded to the Ebola outbreak in West Africa by recreating Ebola treatment centers in the Cotswolds. Which I'm sure you can imagine was awesome. We also regularly stress out all of our corporate donors by putting them on the Jordan-Syria border and forcing them to react to a cholera outbreak. And it helps them to understand the complexities of humanitarian action and some of the difficult decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis. As you're going to see in a moment, we can also use simulation methodologies to tackle complex topics like negotiation or diplomacy, and we use them to help teach external training audiences like yourselves. With that in mind, when Ellie came to me and asked me to do a talk on simulations, I said, yeah, I could do that, but what if I did something else instead?
Someone point him out. He's here.
Take him away.
No, take the chairman. He's worth a lot more money. His wife likes him.
Let's pause here and let's set the scene.
What is this? We're with the Mass Liberation Army. We've taken your god, your leader, Master McCann. We will not release him without $50,000, and you need to release our brothers from the Mass Liberation Army who you've taken. Our government has taken and your governments have supported them. You have 72 hours to comply. Mass today, mass tomorrow, mass forever!
Let's pause again. So coming out of simulation, what we can see is that we've created a scene here. Every simulation begins with a scenario or some sort of precipitating event. In this case, we have a fictional country, Moss, and we have a factional force who has kidnapped our CEO. If we were to put participants in this situation, they would now be forced to deal with some of the repercussions of that. We see some actors that have come in, and they represent what we call an opposition force. That role is the key one. One of the things that we aim to test in a simulation is response to stress and conflict. And that stress and conflict can be represented in many ways. In this case, by a kidnapping. We would normally use an actor for this role, because asking a training participant to fill that role, A, doesn't really give them the skills that we're aiming for, but B, can create some harmful group dynamics that persist outside of a simulation. So this role also can encourage a sense of team bonding by creating a common focal point, whether it's a disaster itself or whether it's a person.
Between you and me, there's rumors that sometimes we do, and you might remember a case of 2009 where there was a person in the air and we got out, and WikiLeaks has also been writing about it. So off the record, I would say your best bet is to negotiate in this particular case, and also if you don't use ransom, you could face a lot of reputational risks and liabilities.
Me again. So in this case, Selma has taken on one of two roles that we like to focus on in simulations for participants. So she's taken on an assumed role. We've asked Selma to put herself in the shoes of a Canadian government representative with some strong opinions on ransoms, but also with some conflicting information. Simulations that are focused on individual behavior can more easily work with participants who take on assumed roles, because these exercises are more interested in the application of learning, which may not be directly linked to organizational or role profiles.
No, I'm sorry. The position is very clear, and we're not going to do anything else, okay? There's absolutely nothing else we can do. RedR's policy is incredibly clear. We do not ever, never pay any ransom requests to release any single member of staff. This is not me saying this. In 2013, the G8 made an unequivocal commitment to say that they will not support payments for ransom. The UK government in 2000, the Terrorism Act, said it is actually illegal to negotiate with terrorists. We do not have an option here. Every major NGO and the Red Cross has the same policy. We have to stand true to that. Our thoughts are with Martin at the moment and with his family. Why is that funny? Our thoughts are with Martin at the moment and with his family. We will do everything we can to advocate his release, but we will not be paying a ransom.
Strong words from someone that some of you might know. So that's Charlie, who is RedR UK's International Programs Director. So in this case, he's actually playing his real role. So Charlie is playing his real role in a fictionalized context. So simulations with learning objectives that are focused on systems and processes work really well when participants take on their own roles in a created environment, because it can test processes, systems, organizations, team structures that are real in a fashioned environment that can bring in unique stresses and unique challenges.
May I say, for sure, it's not the army that is going to do anything about this. We have explained so many times to these foreigners that there is no point in going in certain places. We explain, we warn, and still these aid workers keep coming here, wherever they want, they go wherever they want, and then we need to intervene? No, absolutely not. The MLA keep attacking us. We are not going to risk an engagement with these terrorists if it's not something that we can actually gain for. It's about you, wherever government you are, wherever UN, you can take care of it. For sure, it's not us.
The function of the government or the armed forces can highlight the sometimes challenging and delicate relationship that agencies and aid workers have with host countries. Stefano's extremely convincing portrayal would represent a really unique opportunity for a participant to engage in diplomacy or in negotiation, depending on organizational mandate, obviously. This role might be played by a facilitator in something that we call a control player role. that person can act as a guiding force or a guiding element who knows what's going on outside the simulation, but can guide the simulation itself by asking probing questions or dropping well-timed remarks into a conversation, and can evolve as needed in the scenario to feed in information if participants have missed something or if they're going in a direction that is counterproductive to learning.
Excuse me. Yeah, thank you. I'm reporting here live for the BBC, live from the capital city of Maths. We've just heard that a Canadian national has been kidnapped by the Fringe Maths Liberation Army. We're hearing that some call them terrorists, some in Maths call them freedom fighters, and they use unorthodox means to overthrow a corrupt government. These extreme tactics will certainly support the views of their critics, who have been warning about a possible escalation of violence following a failed coup attempt earlier this year. Can I ask you for a comment, please?
So Allison's journalist highlights one of the most important aspects of simulations for many aid workers, and that's our relationship with the press. So media roles challenge participants to think about how our work is perceived externally by the general public, as well as helping to keep us accountable to affected populations. Many of our sims include this role. Thankfully, most are met with a please go away and talk to our comms team. But it is a really important aspect that trains participants to interact in a positive way with the media. So following a simulation, which you have all gotten a very small taste of, a debrief is essential to analyze and reinforce learning. Because it enables participants to reflect on their actions, on their reactions, as well as to plan for the future and what they might do differently if they encountered a situation in the field in which their CEO was kidnapped, or others. So I hope this has been a very brief introduction to the possibilities of simulations and their application in humanitarian learning spaces. I hope you come talk to me. If you have other questions about RedR's innovative work in this area, I will be around, and thank you for your time.